Welcome back to this course. Now, in this section, we'll be looking at aggregate function, right? Like we said in a previous, video, we were talking about the normal functions, which is essentially the row level function. The aggregate functions are essentially functions that basically summarize like a huge, kind of basically summarize a set of data, right? Of course, you go from having, a couple of rows of data to basically like, having it in one. So for instance, you have like the age of the whole class of 100. And then you were able to find an average, which is essentially one number that basically represents the whole class. In a similar fashion, you have like, you have essentially like the details of people in the class. And then you want to count how many of them is a boy and a girl. So you go from having like a class of 2,000 people, which basically occupies 2,000 rows, then to having like just 2 rows that says boys, total number, and girls, total number. So this is essentially like functions. Now, what are some type of aggregate function? Like we said, this type of functions are a lot, and we cannot list every one of them. We will leave some of the popular ones. We have the sum, and then we have some. We have the count. Count is also interesting. The average, which is essentially written as average. I think it's actually written as maybe I'm wrong. Actually, in different types of SQL, you have them in different differently some way. You might have like some sort of percentile, right? A percentile. Either any one of this is like perhaps it's like one of those aggregates, basically. But there are a lot of aggregates, so it's just so just to use some of these guys, what we will do now is we will essentially go and we will say, let's use a data set that has some value that we could. So we go back into a data set list, and then we will come across maybe like let's give like the income time series, right? The income time series seems like something that would be interesting. So we have the IRS, individual. So basically we are trying individual time series. And then we want to just have a feel of what the data looks like. So we essentially will be limiting by 50. Let's see how it goes. Okay. This looks like something that we have some sort of value here. So this value, perhaps we can use this value and get some sort of, some sort of calculations from it. So perhaps we would like to see a count, right? A count will be something that will be very interesting in this case, right? So maybe we want to count what is the number of rows that we have. Right? What's the number of rows that we have? Now, if we're counting all the rows, then we could just do something like as simple as count. This is basically saying count all rows, right? Essentially count all rows. And so when we run it, what it's going to give is a total number of rows, right? This is count star. So it's counting all rows. Okay, so we have the value. There's a value column, which also stands as the value. Of course, this value can be added, right? This is a sum. This is something you can sum. So we could say, let's sum all the value. Sum or, and perhaps we can also do an average, right? We could do an average values. So we could say this is all. So when we run this, what happens is we will get like the sum values and then we get average of values. So it's essentially saying this is the sum of values or maybe that's the average of values. Also, in the same light, you can even put the percentage of this, which is value. And one thing about this function is when you write this, you can sort of have like a feel of what the function sort of works like. What is the input that is of the function? So let me see if we can have like, say, okay, perhaps we want to do something that's slightly more different, right? So maybe we want to have, like a particular value that maybe represents 0.5, right? Which is basically the median. Say 5 here. And then when we run this, oh, okay, this is not going to work normally. We're still going to come back to this anyways. But basically, you have a situation where you have sum and you have the average, right? So this is how you sort of, aggregate data. We're moving from the row level aggregate, right? And then the row level data to like aggregate data, where we're saying, oh, sum all of the ages, or average of all of the ages, or count all of the boys, or do this. And so maybe if we were interested to count in only a class, we could even maybe put the at clause and say, oh, this is what you should be counting. Right? So let's put the star, for instance. Let's put the star. See what we can even count. Perhaps we can count something on its own. Okay, this could negate this one. And then when we run query, we essentially see, okay, we have the case with different type of zip IDs. So now, okay, this is one interesting one that we could. So we could essentially come and say, we want to see the count for the year. Now, note this is a row level function. This is part of what we could have done in the previous class, which you see, this is the year. And one thing we could do here is to maybe run it so that you have a feel of what it looks like. So we have like the year. Okay. So what this does is essentially converts the date column to the year. So we have 2016. I could put the date column beside it so you see what is before. So you have like the before, which is the date, and then the actual conversion after the date has been converted. So now you have, if we would like to see we want to see this metrics for this year. Maybe we want to see for 2020, and we could count the width part and say, okay, it's equal to 2020. Now, if we move to the back, then we could run, for instance, what we're doing now is counting the sum of values, average values, and then the count of occurrence in the year 2020. So when we run this, first, this filters the whole data set. This applies the aggregate. If you notice, the values are different from the previous values. They're off the aggregate. But in the next class, we will see how to count or to aggregate with a group. So you have you have to do some aggregates, right? It's important. And this is what we'll be looking at in the next one. Thank you.